Hey, how you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Glad to hear it. We'll go ahead and get started then. So you guys met in Germany while at a teaching job?
That's right. Yeah, we were both got Fulbright scholarships to teach English in Germany. There were, I think, 160 teachers going all over Germany, but we ended up in the same city, so just started hanging out together, playing music.
Yeah, just kind of a dumb luck scenario,
Yeah.
basically. Just sort of like you wind up somewhere and it's like, oh, sweet, you play fiddle? All right, cool. Let's start playing music together. So that's kind of how it happened.
Awesome. So to assume that you both had an interest in the music like of Germany?
Not necessarily. We both studied, or yeah, we majored in German in college, and then kind of did music separately from that. Yeah.
Yeah, Julie was doing a lot of orchestra stuff, and I was kind of more into, I don't know, just all sorts of different kinds of music. But when I was living in Germany, I got really into uh, some some German, you know, some German musicians. Of course, when I was in college, you study a lot of a guy named Bertolt Brecht, and he wrote what's a kind of famous musical from the 1920s called the Three Penny Opera. And his kind of musical partner was a guy named Kurt Weill, who became a really influential um, composer, and they wrote a tune that became famous in the U.S. called "Mac the Knife." Like Louis Armstrong covered it and stuff, but it's actually originally a German tune. But so I was really into people like Bertolt Brecht, and then kind of also some sort of like '90s German alt rock bands. Like there's a band called Tokotronic that was sort of doing like a weird German Weezer kind of thing, and I got really into bands like them. And then of course when we were there in 2012, there was all sorts of German hip hop stuff happening at that time. There was a guy named Peter Fox who was putting out a lot of really cool stuff at that time. So yeah, I think like you don't go to Germany necessarily thinking about the music,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think everyone from America tends to think of like papa kind of like accordion type stuff. But there's just some, I don't know. I think because I was so fascinated with German culture in general, I sort of kind of really dug around to try to find what I thought was cool German music that was happening. You kind of have to dig around to find it, but it exists, and there's just some awesome bands. Who's the lady who did the Du hast den Farbfilm vergessen? Nina Hagen was her name. Anyway, there's just a bunch of really awesome kind of not very well known groups outside of Germany that are doing really kind of cool outside of outside of the popular conscience kind of stuff, but they're also sort of interacting with American culture in a really unique way. Um, anyway, I can talk about it forever, but I'll stop there. Yeah.
Sure, no, yeah. You talked about the culture in Germany. So I'd be curious to learn how did the cultural environment overseas kind of help cultivate and strengthen your relationship both as friends and as musicians?
I think there's something, well, so you're from north central Indiana, you know. It's like I grew up in Warsaw, and so when I first went over to kind of southwestern Germany, I was in a city called Freiburg. But anyway, then when I met Julie in Leipzig, it's kind of the same deal. But there are these different regions of Germany that have really strong like accents and really strong like kind of local identities. Um, and I was just I became really fascinated by that. And of course, when you go somewhere else and start to look at like, okay, they have this kind of regional identity. They say certain words a certain way. They like have certain traditional garb that they dress in, and certain traditional folk styles that are hyper localized and really fascinating. And so anyway, when I went over there, I kind of started seeing that these people had something really beautiful and unique to themselves, and they maybe didn't appreciate it as much as I, as an outsider, appreciated it. I mean, to me, like seeing Swiss people yodel is like amazing. But of course, to them, it's kind of hokey. But so anyway, then going there and seeing this, what from my perspective was an amazing local culture, and looking back at where I come from and where you come from, sort of like, okay, well, what is it that makes where I come from special? And what are the traditions that we have that are unique? Um, and so then I just started kind of looking, all around, getting really into kind of local Kosciuszko County history, stuff like, John Dillinger, held up uh, the jail in Warsaw, and sort of, kind of thinking, okay, what is it that makes my culture special? And so then the first kind of album we put out was sort of an homage to Kosciuszko County, and it was called Kosciuszko County. And I was really actively trying to create a sort of musical identity. And of course, it was a very like highbrow, pie in the sky concept, and I think I totally failed at it. But I really, I was really thinking about that a lot at that time. And when we started playing together, just sort of looking back at America and saying, okay, what are the special regional things that we have? And then we started traveling and finding, like, okay, the local gospel singing is really amazing. There's like body percussive stuff like the ham bone that we do in our show. And Cajun music is really a fascinating thing down in southern Louisiana. Um, and Kansas City, where we live now, has an amazing jazz kind of tradition. And so I think being outside of your culture and seeing what they have that's special kind of makes you want to come back and look at your own culture and sort of under a microscope and sort of see, okay, what's sort of special here? What am I maybe as an insider missing in my own culture that I think should be, championed?
So you had talked about, where bluegrass kind of came from, or at least you talked about your classical experience, the application of, your broad interest in music. So would you categorize yourself as bluegrass artists, or would you say that your music style kind of exceeds that classification?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly people who wouldn't call it bluegrass, but we didn't grow up in the tradition like some people do, but we really studied it a lot. We would, drive around the country and just listen to all the old masters, Bill Monroe, Flat and Scruggs, and try to really absorb all that music and get what we got out of it, which may not be what other people consider bluegrass, but I think we consider ourselves a bluegrass band for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, we're definitely in that tradition.
Mhm.
So what would you say separates bluegrass from country, folk, other subgenres of country?
Well, kind of the main, yeah, yeah. Of course, it's a really complicated question because it's the music with like almost 100-year history now, and it has many offshoots. But I mean, the big thing is that it's generally acoustic music. So while there were some bluegrass bands in the 70s that added drums, generally you don't see the drum kit, anywhere in bluegrass. That was kind of a fad that sort of died. Not very many people do that. Kind of the second big thing is sort of the repertoire of songs. I think bluegrass does a nice job of mixing traditional American songs with sort of original material that people write. And that doesn't really happen. And you look at like hip hop or even a closer genre, maybe country music. Generally, country artists go out and perform kind of their own music or what is on the radio, but they don't necessarily harken back to like um, really old recordings like Carter Family or I mean sometimes they do, but I think bluegrass definitely has this element of harkening way back to sort of mm, pre-modern or at least pre-recorded music history. And so I think you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, when you play a show with several different bluegrass bands, you almost have to listen to their set and make sure you're not playing the same songs because there is a very strong repertoire that everybody has to know certain songs and play them.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas, in country music, well, it's a little bit like jazz in that respect.
Right,
There's a
yeah.
canon of songs and that people play for jazz. But yeah, so I think the acoustic nature of it and sort of the kind of the traditional songs that are played and the repertoire. Um,
And maybe singing higher in your register. I think country goes lower, and bluegrass you go as high as you possibly can.
yeah, I sing really at the top of my range when I sing. It's kind of got, or at least the bluegrass that we like, sort
Yeah.
of has this edge to it. This kind of, it almost doesn't sound good, you know, especially when I sing it. But
It's not polished, as polished.
yeah.
Sure, sure. What I've heard from you guys. Moving on to the song titles, I noticed you had some interesting titles. Your songs is unique. So, like for example, Mark's Mini Golf, Biking with Will, Dancing in the Kitchen. How much of this, like your titles, your lyrics, what stems from experiences, emotions, moments that you've shared, and what inspires the rest? Where did these titles
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, every song's different. I don't really write songs by a playbook per se. Sometimes I write stuff like, well, like Mark's mini golf course. I just have a buddy, Mark, who built a mini golf course in his backyard. And so I just wrote a tune and thought that was a fun name for a tune. So some are like that. And then, well, I wrote Dancing in the Kitchen. Julie and I, we were dancing in the kitchen one day, and then I was listening to there's some old country music that, where there are these like talking verses, and I always kind of liked
Mm.
that and wanted to write a song with talking verses, so I kind of combined sort of personal experience with wanting to do that. And then there are just some songs that are like not personal experience at all,
Yeah.
that are just, I don't know,
Just sound good or a good story.
yeah, sound good or a good story. You know, I Yeah, I just for our new record that'll be out in October, I have one called The Badlands. That's just about this guy who got in bar fights and like of course I never did that. Like I mean you can tell by looking at me. I'm not really a fighter. I'm more of a just a snark. But 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 yeah, so sometimes it's just fun. I don't know. Sometimes I read the newspaper. I've definitely gotten stuff. I wrote a song called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Lose because I read there was the CIA torture report kind of came out, and it was back however many years ago that came out, 2015, and sort of kind of wrote a song halfway inspired by that, and so just kind of whatever. Wrote songs about my dad, wrote songs about kind of halfway about my dad, and then not about my dad. I just made up parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of surreal in that sense, where it's partially your own experience and partially just being done.
Sure. The match seller name come from?
So that's from a painting in Germany by a German painter called Otto Dix, and he kind of wrote, or not wrote, but he painted around the same time as Bertolt Brecht, Andrew's hero, and Andrew really loves that period of German history. And this painting is of somebody, well, it's a war cripple from World War One, whistling a tune on the street and selling matches, and people are just walking by him. There's a dog peeing on him. it's because it's kind of a commentary on the music industry nowadays, as well as harkening back to our German history in Germany.
Very cool. So, having read over the bio, it seems that you've performed on a variety of stages. Can you tell us about some of your favorite experiences or notable moments that you shared on the stage?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, one of the coolest was getting to do NPR's Mountain Stage. I mean, it was at the West Virginia State Capitol, and so like you walk in, it's just a huge, big theater, and like it was like broadcast like 200 stations around the U.S. and just a lot. I mean, one of my heroes, John Hartford, like played on there, and I mean, tons of people have done that show, and so that was like for me just a huge, huge deal. It really felt like kind of validation for what I've been trying to do artistically. But I mean, another one of my favorite shows was at our friend Johnny Lawhorn's basement. Like, he was living in his house in Kansas City, and his girlfriend threw this party for him, and we just played in his basement for like 20 people, and there was like kind of like mold in the basement, and it was leaking, and there was like a pool of water down there, and
There
like
was a punk band that played after us.
a great punk band called Gas Can played after us.
So yeah, the audience makes a huge difference in if the gig is fun or not.
Yeah, really, that's it. Like, I'll play on a huge theater stage or somebody's dirty basement, just as long as there's cool people there,
Yeah.
Right, all about the atmosphere. Right, exactly. Well, hey, that concludes my questions. The Moon's excited to have you back. So we look forward to hearing what you guys bring this coming weekend.
All
Yeah,
right.
we're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, I hope you got some ice cream there because we're bringing the heat. We're bringing the heat.
Noted. As we speak.